Indicted Fiction, the most untrue crime podcast out there. Everything you're about to hear is fictional, but the feelings you may experience are 100% real. The Case of Adam's Murder, Episode 12, Fear, recorded the night of November 1st. The bruising was the worst. His eyes were swollen shut, and the doctors told us one of his eye sockets had been broken in 3 places. It had been a blunt object that caused these wounds. I'm sure the stab wounds were much worse than the bruising, but thankfully I was kept from seeing those. By the time we had gotten to the hospital, they had treated those. There were 5, technically 4 and a slash wound. 1 in his chest, 2 above his left hip, and 1 just below his armpit that went through the muscle of his chest and out. Thankfully so, or worse would have been done. The slash wound went from his collarbone diagonally across his chest, slicing his nipple in half. One of his legs had been broken. It had been busted at the knee. The doctor said he would never walk the same again. That is, if they could get his kneecap to heal properly. He had lost a lot of blood, so much so that they required a transfusion. He wasn't conscious for this decision, so the doctors chose to do so. When work was over, my father was to meet his coworker in the parking lot so they could drive home. Like I said before, they do this every other day. When 20 minutes passed, his coworker assumed he might have been busy or in the bathroom. When 40 minutes passed, he grew concerned. He went back into the shop and checked my dad's office. He checked the shop floor. He checked the waiting room. He was nowhere to be found. So the last place being the lot where they stored customers' cars behind the shop, his coworker went outside. My father was laid face down on the asphalt in a puddle of his own blood. His coworker quickly called the police. I learned all this morning while visiting the hospital. His coworker, a man who goes by Teddy, came to see him and explained everything. The police had shown up, asking us questions like who he had been in contact with lately, and did he recently have a falling out with anyone. We answered, but I kept things short. One of the officers that came in was a younger guy that had come to tell us Adam had been found dead. He hadn't been in contact since that day. I really didn't have contact with any of them. Nothing more had been done about Adam's case. It was a rough day. Doctors told us my dad was in a coma. They hoped it would be short, and they thought with his injuries that it should be. But I wasn't so sure. I was skeptical of everyone. If the police wouldn't help me, why would a doctor help my father? This began to pour out into other parts of my life. I noticed when I went to the convenience store this afternoon, I wondered why the clerk would bag my things. They were my things. Why was he helping? Why did the person in front of me let me go ahead? They didn't have to do that. We weren't allowed to stay overnight, so we came in at the earliest time we could, which was late in the morning since we had to wait for someone to come change our tires. My mother stayed all day, but the room was so cramped and humid that I had to get out. I walked home, much to my mother's discontent. It was only a walk over the river and 2 or 3 miles to get to our apartment complex. When I got home, I took off my jacket, seeing the phone number. Lenny. I completely forgot to text him. I hoped he didn't think I stood him up, so instead of sending him a text that could easily be ignored, I called him. He picked up after a few rings, but didn't say anything when he answered. I said hi and introduced myself, and he seemed gleeful that I called. When he asked why I didn't text him once I got off work, I didn't know if I should tell him. He said he was worried all day since he had expected a text early that morning. I asked if he was really that worried, and he said yes, that he was worried I didn't like him, and the guy he had seen leaving the store weirded him out. He had contemplated sticking around to be sure that the creep didn't do anything, but figured it was just his over-imaginative mind. I told him I knew the guy, that the guy is obsessed with me, and chased me through the store after he left. He apologized profusely, and I told him not to worry. It was then I decided I should just be honest. I told him that I didn't text him because my father was in the hospital. He had been beaten into a coma. Silence. Then he took a deep breath and apologized. I don't think there's another response for when someone gives you such painful news, especially when you don't know the person very well. He then asked if I'd like to go to dinner to get my mind off of things. It may sound sleazy, but he asked in a tone that signified he truly cared. It didn't sound like he was just looking for sex. I told him I don't have a car, and he said it was no problem, that he'd gladly pick me up. I asked where we were going, and he offered to take me to a Mexican restaurant down the street. I agreed, we set a time, and I told him I could actually walk there. He said with an obsessive maniac on my tail he wouldn't let me walk anywhere and to text him the address as soon as possible. I think I like Lenny. I tried to find something nice to wear. I almost chose my black jeans and black dress shirt until I remembered that's what I wore to Adam's funeral. When would I bring that up? If he asked what I did for fun, would I tell him I didn't do anything for fun? Would I tell him that my only focus in life has been solving the murder of my brother? It was sure to be an interesting topic. So instead, I chose a flowery long-sleeve top, something my mother had surely picked out for me 5 years ago, and a pair of dark blue jeans. I wouldn't be caught dead in my tennis shoes outside of work, so I pulled out an old pair of mock army boots I had from high school. I had to dust them off a little bit, but they looked nice. In this suspenseful short story collection, Flirting with Death by Kayla Krantz, see the world through the eyes of madness and witness life on the edge of death. Monsters don't live under your bed. They live next door. Get the collection at mybook.to/flirtingwithdeathcl. My mom texted me to see if I was alright. I told her I was fine and going to dinner with a friend. I was sad I didn't get a chance to tell her I met a guy yet, but sitting next to my father in a coma wasn't exactly the best place to do so. I stepped outside only to realize I would need a sweatshirt over my shirt. So much for looking colorful. I waited out on the balcony for Lenny, wondering what he drove. It was drizzling outside and cold enough to see your breath, but I felt none of it. I didn't even feel that excited about the date. Rather, I almost dreaded it. I say almost because it was better than sitting alone in my dark apartment or in the dreary hospital room beside my barely surviving father. Lenny showed up in a small pickup. I don't think I've ever seen one so small. He parked and met me at the bottom of the stairs, then took my hand and led me to his truck. He asked how my day was. I saw a flash of, I probably shouldn't have asked that, across his face. I wanted to make him feel bad for no other reason than my life was shit. But why mess up the only good thing going for me? So I said things were going well and that I was just worried about my dad. I didn't say it sarcastically. I didn't add any extra tone or attitude. I just said it and asked how he was doing. He opened the door for me and the cab of his truck didn't reek of cigarettes or pot. I thought I could actually smell cinnamon. Despite Lenny and I being close in age, I don't remember ever seeing him around. Then again, it wasn't super common for a person to live in the same town for their entire life. He came from a town south of us called Woodland. I distantly remember going there to look at houses when I was around 7. But even back then, houses were too expensive for my parents. When we had showed up to Woodland, I had been very disappointed that it, in fact, was not a woodland full of prancing deer and fairies, but a sad agricultural town. I asked why he chose to move somewhere like this, and he said his job had brought him out here. Dia de los Muertos is a small restaurant. I usually pick up food from the outside window. I don't think I'd ever been inside until going in with Lenny. When we parked, he opened my door and grabbed my hand to help me out, and when we got to the restaurant, he opened the door for me again. Either he was raised right, or he's really trying to earn some brownie points. We took a seat by the front window that overlooked a bustling, dirty street. The menu was daunting, especially for a person that doesn't like eating in front of people. Besides sushi, I think Mexican food is one of the worst foods to eat in front of somebody on a first date. But that's just coming from my paranoid brain. Tacos make you open your mouth all wide and you have to hold your head sideways. Burritos, again, make you open your mouth wide, not to mention the farts later on. I would never plan a burrito date followed by cuddling and watching a movie. And nachos get your fingers all dirty, and you have to sit there and either lick them off or scrub them with a napkin. And after all that work, they still feel sticky. I realize that doesn't even touch on most Mexican cuisine, but that's about the only 3 items I usually get. Alright, enough about the food. Food makes me nervous, at least in front of cute guys. He chose to sit with his back to the window, so I got stuck watching traffic drive by in the rain behind his head. It almost took precedence over what he said. He was talking about his parents, and all I could think was red car, white truck, black truck, blue car, green SUV, and so on and so on. I just hope there won't be a quiz about what we talked about today. Our food arrived, and I picked up my fork and knife cautiously. I would eat this burrito with dignity, hold in any farts I may have in his car, and spend the night alone in my apartment. Movie dates were a bit much for a first date. Too much potential. This time he was talking about something I can't remember while I tried to keep my eyes from the road. It was just light enough to see cars with their headlights on. The sun was setting behind the sea of gray clouds in the sky. Joel's car drove by. My heart skipped a beat. I've been avoiding him for quite a few days now. I would have thought it was just a coincidence that he drove by the restaurant I was in. But then he drove by a second, then a third, then a 4th time. By the 5th time, I was sweating. It's hard to avoid someone that knows where you live. It's hard to avoid someone you grew up with. 15 minutes passed and I didn't see him again. By this time, we were almost finished with our dinner. Lenny had gone silent and I hadn't noticed. I apologized and decided to at least partially come clean. I hoped it would help him forgive me for being so absent on this date. He already knew my father was in the hospital, but he didn't know the extent of everything else. I briefly explained that my brother had recently been murdered, and that I really could think of nothing but it for weeks. That is, until my father. His eyes softened and he looked to be on the verge of tears. It was rare to see someone show so much sympathy, someone with a bit of empathy. He asked how I was handling it so well, and I was taken aback. Handling it so well? I guess in his eyes I was a hard-working girl with a sociable side. He hadn't seen the darker, isolated person I really am. But maybe he saw a glimpse of it through my tired eyes on that date. He ordered dessert and offered to split it with me since I had declined when the waitress asked. I declined his offer as well. I couldn't tell if it was the beans or the fact that Chuck drove by that made my stomach turn. Again, it would have been of no importance had it been once, but no, it had been over and over and over as Lenny happily scooped up his flan and ate it. "You sure you don't want some?" he asked as Chuck's car crept by. He asked a second time before I said no. He apologized about my current situation. It warmed my heart a little bit, if I'm going to be honest. I tried to tear my eyes away from the street to look at his face and maybe salvage this night. I told him to just start asking me questions and that I would ask one in return for each of his. This always worked when getting to know someone when I was younger. I learned a few facts about him. Like he has a pet snake named Dragon, and he likes pumpkin pie all year round. I thought that was pretty weird, but quirky at least. Without jarring Halloween makeup on, he had a handsome face. He asked if I ever had any pets. I cringed, stating we used to have a black cat. I told him that was a story for another time, a less depressing time. He nodded solemnly. I'm sure he was thinking I was still heartbroken that our cat had been run over or just never came home one night. The truth was just unbelievable. By the end of the date, I felt less anxious. I couldn't tell if it was attributed to the fact that I was more comfortable with him or because I hadn't seen Joel or Chuck drive by again. We packed up our leftovers and left the restaurant. The rain was pounding down, and in an adorable move of chivalry, Lenny took off his jacket and held it over my head as we ran to his car. He held my hand on the drive home and had a light smile on his face. When we parked at my apartment complex, he looked over and said, "I'm glad I met you." I returned the phrase, feeling weird. I don't think anyone has ever said that to me, let alone a cute guy. I keep saying cute because saying handsome over and over seems odd. He got out, running around the front of the car and almost slipping just to open my door. He closed it and grabbed my hands. He said, "I had fun tonight." And just like in the movies, we kissed in the rain. Nothing extravagant, just a short lips meeting lips, no tongue. My hair and face and shoulders were damp and cold, but inside I finally felt warm. I almost teared up thinking about Adam. Weird to think about your brother when you're kissing somebody, right? But I thought about if he could see me right now, how much he'd make fun of me, and how much I would love it, how much I would trade the world for it. No price is too much. Adam could make fun of me every waking day for the rest of my life, and it would be better than him being gone. I was thankful for the rain so Lenny couldn't see the tears running down my face. I wonder if he tasted their salt. See, if Adam would have been alive, I never would have been stocking those shelves at the job that he was supposed to have. I never would have met Jamal. I never would have met Lenny. I feel like I'm in Adam's place still. I mean, I'm sure things wouldn't exactly be the same. I'm sure Adam wouldn't be standing in the rain kissing Lenny, having met him on Halloween night. But maybe him and Chantel could have had their moment if it had just been me 6 feet under instead of him. He pulled away, staring deep into my eyes. I hoped he couldn't see the tears. He was smiling, so I'm sure he didn't. We walked to the stairs to my apartment, and he said goodbye. I watched him run out in the rain and dive into his car. As he backed out of the space, I turned to go up the stairs, looking up to catch Chuck's blazing blue eyes from the balcony. So someone was indeed watching, but I was sure he wasn't going to make fun of me about it. No, he planned to do much worse. Instead of getting theatrical with it by asking what he was doing at my apartment, I gave him no attention, simply walking up the stairs and trying to walk past him. I don't know why I thought that would work. When his hand shot out and grabbed my arm, I didn't know how to feel. I knew I was supposed to be scared, but at the same time I was filled with rage. The audacity of this guy. I shoved him off, figuring his first attempt would be light, but his second attempt would be the kill. He wouldn't let go if I let him get me again, so I ran. I hit my door like a linebacker, so thankful that someone had left it unlocked. I didn't, but somebody did. I fell inside, actually slipping on the tiles by our front door, and jammed my shoulder into the ground. I'm sure our downstairs neighbor was curious as to what the fuck was going on. I looked up to see Chantel and my mother looking at me with eyes the size of ostrich eggs. I slammed the door shut with my foot, scrambling to stand. I stood up just in time to see Chuck barrel through the door. It swung open, almost nailing me in the side, and a wet, red-faced Ginger stumbled in. I latched onto the door, about to slam it into him, when I heard a very familiar click. I saw Chuck freeze before I saw Chantel. She stood there like a Charlie's Angel. I watched in awe. She said, "You've got about 3 seconds before I put 6 holes in your chest." I don't believe Chuck has ever been faced with the barrel of a gun, but I do believe this isn't the first time Chantel has pointed a gun at someone. All the color left his face, and he backed away slowly, letting go of my arm. He closed the door, and after I locked both locks, we watched out my parents' big picture window to see if he would leave on the main road toward his own place. We had no windows facing the parking lot, and I was too scared to go outside, so we waited. A few tense minutes passed before he sped by in his beater. I was still confused as to why Chantel was in the apartment with my mom. 1, I was surprised my mom was home, and not by my father's side. 2, I was curious why and how Chantel and my mom had gotten acquainted. I learned as we watched reruns of an old cartoon that Chantel had come over looking for me. I guess she had texted me and I just hadn't noticed. I guess I should take my phone off silent once in a while. It was already pretty late, but my mom made us all tea and heated up TV dinners for her and Chantel. I realized I left my leftovers in Lenny's car, and that's when I brought him up. We had already discussed Chuck and my father's condition being the same as earlier when I was at the hospital, so I thought a little good news would cheer them up at least a little. My mom was ecstatic, despite the dried tears on her face, and Chantel asked all the questions. Is he cute? What does he drive? Where does he work? I didn't even think to ask him, so I texted him on the spot, telling him I had fun again and assuring him if we went on another date, I wouldn't be so spacey. My mom fell asleep in Dad's recliner, something that broke my heart to see, and Chantel fell asleep on the couch beside me. I couldn't sleep, so I've been here on my bed, retelling this odd day. Lenny finally responded about 5 minutes ago, despite me having texted him 2.5 hours ago. He works at Saki. Thanks for listening. Be sure to tune in next Friday for Adam's Murder, Episode 13, The End. Adam's Murder is up for pre-order, order signed copies on my website, paperbacks on Amazon, and ebooks on Barnes & Noble. I'd like to shout out my patrons, Andy, Vernon, Greg, Steve, and Colby. Thank you all for your support, and if you'd like to support me on Patreon, go to patreon.com/AlyannaPoe. I have a special project that is exclusive to Patreon coming up in November. If you'd like to read the transcribed audio diary of Abigail Drummer, go to my website, authoralyannapoe.com/blog. Each episode is posted on my blog under Indicted Fiction.